The winter of 1888 had been so mild on the US East Coast, the mildest in nearly 2 decades, that by early March trees were already budding and robins had returned to the city. It was over 50 degrees, so clearly spring that Walt Whitman submitted a poem about dandelions to the New York Herald. The poem was published on March 12th. By then, it was comically ill-timed. Here's what life was really like during the Great Blizzard of 1888, the deadliest winter storm in American history. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. All right, tonight it's the Great Blizzard of 1888. But wait, are you comfortable? No, really. Check. Pillows, blankets, the whole deal. Where we're going, you'll want to be settled. Your eyes flutter open to the gentle morning light filtering through your bedroom window. For a moment you forget what day it is. Saturday, March 10th. 1888. You stretch and notice something unusual. The air coming through the slightly open window isn't biting cold, as it should be in March. It's pleasant. Warm even. You climb out of bed, your bare feet touching the wooden floor that's not nearly as cold as it should be this time of year. Outside, the view of New York City is bustling with activity. People are walking without heavy coats. Some women have even abandoned their muffs and men their scarves. Glorious day, isn't it? Your neighbor calls as you step outside. Later, he's in his shirt sleeves, rolling up the cuffs and tilting his face toward the sun. Mother Nature playing tricks on us, I think, making us believe it's April already. You nod, basking in the unexpected warmth. Indeed. Hard to believe it's still winter. The streets of New York are vibrant with activity. Children play in the parks, couples stroll arm in arm, and vendors hawk their wares with renewed vigor. The harsh grip of winter seems to have released its hold weeks early, and everyone is celebrating. Not like your cozy bed now, of course. No need to venture into the bitter cold these days. You can just snuggle deeper under your blankets as I tell you this story of how quickly comfort can turn to catastrophe. Because here's the thing about that March day in 1888. Nobody knew what was coming. Not the weather service, not the citizens happily enjoying the spring-like temperatures, not even the most weather-wise old-timers who claimed they could feel it in their bones when bad weather was approaching. Walt Whitman, the 68-year-old celebrated American poet, certainly didn't know. Living in New Jersey, he had felt inspired by the early spring. On March 10th, he penned a poem called The First Dandelion and sent it off to the New York Herald for publication. Simple and fresh and fair from winter's close emerging, as if no artifice of fashion, business, politics had ever been, forth from its sunny nook of sheltered grass innocent, golden, calm as the dawn, the spring's first dandelion shows its trustful face. Pretty, right? A nice little poem about spring's arrival. The Herald would publish it just 2 days later on March 12th. By then, the dandelion would be buried under feet of snow and people would be freezing to death in the streets. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. On that Saturday, March 10th, the weather was so pleasant that people were genuinely confused. The winter had been mild all along, the mildest in nearly 20 years, according to some accounts. But this was different. This felt like spring had fully arrived. "You know what's weird?" says James, a bartender at a popular downtown establishment as he polishes glasses. "My grandmother always said an early spring means a bad storm's coming. Weather too fair means trouble in the air. That's what she'd say." His customer laughs, sipping his beer. "My grandmother had sayings like that too. If we listened to all of them, we'd never leave the house." Fair enough. James shrugs. "But I don't know. Something feels off about this warmth. That night, the theatres are packed, the opera houses overflow with patrons enjoying a night out without the hassle of heavy coats and freezing carriages. The restaurants buzz with conversation and laughter. William Steinway, the famous piano maker, enjoys the evening with his family. They attend a show and return home, remarking on the pleasant temperatures. They have no idea that in just 2 days he'll write in his diary about the most fearful snowstorm I ever experienced. Meanwhile, in the offices of the U.S. Army Signal Corps, the nation's weather service, meteorologists study their instruments. They see concerning patterns forming. A cold front is moving down from Canada, while warm, wet air surges up from the Gulf. But their calculations suggest these systems will dissipate before reaching the East Coast. Imagine being the weather forecaster who makes that call. Nah, it'll blow over before it hits New York. Famous last words, right? Sergeant Francis Long, the indications officer in New York, issues the forecast for March 11th. Fresh to brisk southerly winds with rain, followed by colder brisk westerly winds and clearing weather throughout the Atlantic states. Rain, then clearing. That's it. No mention of snow, let alone the most devastating blizzard in American history. Sunday morning, March 11th, dawns even warmer. The temperature climbs above 50 degrees. People head to church in their Sunday best, leaving heavy coats at home. Children race ahead of their parents, delighting in the freedom of movement without bulky winter clothing. Pastor says this weather is God's blessing. A young mother tells her friend as they walk home from church, says we've endured enough winter hardship. The friend nods. My husband's already planning the spring planting. Says we might get an early harvest this year if the weather holds. If only they knew. By midday, observant citizens might notice some changes. The wind shifts slightly. Clouds begin to gather on the northern horizon. Nothing alarming, just the rain that had been predicted. On Wall Street, brokers discuss business prospects for the spring season. In the tenements of the Lower East Side, windows are thrown open to air out the cramped apartments. In Central Park, nannies watch children play while young couples stroll along the paths. I've spent a weird amount of time reading about this storm, like I've gone through old newspapers and diaries, and one thing keeps striking me. Nobody saw it coming. Not the experts, not the average folks, nobody. It makes you think about how vulnerable we all are. Even now, with our fancy weather satellites and computer models, Mother Nature can still throw a sucker punch when she wants to. Late Sunday afternoon, the first hints of trouble appear. The temperature begins to drop, not dramatically, just enough that people begin to button up their lightweight coats. The wind freshens and the first spatters of rain begin to fall. Better get home, a policeman advises a group of lingering park-goers. Looks like we're in for some weather. In the harbour, ship captains eye the darkening northern sky with growing concern. Old sailors know that sudden weather changes rarely bring good news. Some make the decision to delay their departures, battening down their vessels for what they assume will be a spring storm. Others, pressured by schedules and finances, set sail despite their misgivings. By evening, the rain falls more heavily. The temperature continues to drop, but it's still just rain, cold and uncomfortable, but nothing extraordinary. People hurry home, mildly annoyed at having their pleasant weekend spoiled, but not genuinely concerned. In the Signal Corps office, however, there's growing alarm. The instruments show rapidly falling pressure. The temperature is dropping faster than expected. Reports from stations to the west and north indicate severe conditions developing. But it's too late to issue new warnings. Telegraph lines are already beginning to fail as the storm intensifies. The critical window of opportunity to alert the public has closed. As night falls, something strange happens. The rain becomes heavier, then changes to sleet. The wind increases dramatically. By midnight, gusts are reaching hurricane force, up to 85 miles per hour in some areas, and the sleet changes to snow. Not gentle floating snowflakes, but hard driving pellets of ice carried horizontally on the screaming wind. They sting the face like needles, making it impossible to keep your eyes open if facing the gale. "What in God's name?" mutters a night watchman as he struggles to make his rounds. The wind nearly knocks him off his feet, and the swirling snow makes it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Now, picture this. You're in your bed right now, warm and safe. Maybe there's a storm outside your window, maybe not, but you're inside, protected from the elements. That night in 1888, people went to bed with rain pattering on their windows and woke to a howling monster of a storm unlike anything they'd ever experienced. In the tenements, families huddle together as the temperature plummets and the wind finds every crack and crevice in the poorly constructed buildings. The coal in their stoves won't last the night at this rate, and tomorrow's delivery seems increasingly unlikely. In the mansions of Fifth Avenue, the wealthy are better insulated, but equally bewildered by the sudden violence of the storm. Servants are dispatched to secure shutters and stoke fires. "I've never heard the wind howl like this," a young woman tells her husband as they lie in bed, listening to the storm rage. "It sounds like a living thing." "It'll pass by morning," he assures her, though the tremor in his voice betrays his uncertainty. It does not pass by morning. As the first hints of dawn break on Monday, March 12th, New Yorkers wake to an alien world. Those who can see out their windows, many are blocked by snow, behold a city transformed. Streets have vanished under enormous drifts. Familiar landmarks are barely recognizable, covered in white. And still the snow falls, and still the wind howls. In the offices of the New York Herald, editors are scrambling. They've just published Walt Whitman's Ode to Spring Dandelions on the very day that the worst blizzard in memory has buried the city under feet of snow. Some see the irony and laugh despite the dire situation. Others are too busy trying to figure out how to publish a newspaper when most of the staff can't make it to work. "Should we pull the poem?" asks a junior editor. The senior editor shakes his head. "Too late, but mark my words, people will remember this coincidence for years to come." He was right about that. The ill-timed poem became a symbol of how suddenly disaster can strike, how quickly comfort can turn to catastrophe. As dawn breaks fully, revealing the full extent of the transformation, the city holds its breath. The storm shows no signs of abating. The temperature continues to plummet. The wind screams between buildings, creating vortices of snow that blind and disorient. And still, because it's Monday, thousands of New Yorkers prepare to go to work. There are no snow days, no paid time off for weather emergencies. If you don't show up, you don't get paid. For many living paycheck to paycheck, missing a day's wages isn't an option. So they bundle up as best they can and step out into one of the deadliest storms in American history. What they don't yet realize is that this is just the beginning. The Great White Hurricane, as it will come to be known, is still gathering strength. The worst is yet to come. The meteorologists at the Signal Corps station finally realize the magnitude of what's happening. This isn't just a winter storm, it's something unprecedented in their experience. A unique combination of factors has created a monster, cold Arctic air colliding with warm, moisture-laden air from the Gulf, all spinning around a rapidly intensifying low-pressure system. "Oh my God," whispers one observer as he records temperatures in free fall and wind speeds climbing even higher. "What have we missed?" By now, it's too late for warnings. The storm has already enveloped the entire northeastern seaboard from the Chesapeake to Maine. Telegraph lines are down. Railroads are at a standstill. Cities and towns are increasingly isolated, each left to face the blizzard's fury alone. In New York, the first casualties are already occurring, though few know it yet. An elderly man collapses while trying to walk to the corner store. A homeless person freezes to death in an alley, the blizzard's bitter cold proving fatal within hours. A child becomes disoriented in the whiteout conditions, just steps from their front door, wandering off in the wrong direction. The temperature keeps dropping, the wind keeps howling, the snow keeps falling, and the worst is still to come. Monday morning, March 12th. The city that never sleeps has been smothered in a blanket of white. Picture this. You've gone to bed with rain tapping on your window and you wake up to a world transformed. The wind doesn't just blow, it screams. The snow doesn't just fall, it attacks. And you have to go to work because, hey, it's 1888 and sick days aren't a thing yet. That's the situation facing thousands of New Yorkers as they wake up on that Monday morning. The snowfall had started around midnight, and by dawn there's already 10 inches on the ground with more, much more, on the way. "It's just snow," mutters Jonathan Berkeley, a bank clerk on Wall Street, as he peers out his frosted window. Been through plenty of snowstorms before. His wife grabs his arm. "Please don't go. Something feels different about this one." He shakes her off gently. Different or not, Mr. Morgan doesn't accept weather as an excuse for absence. Poor bastard has no idea what he's walking into. See, this isn't just any snowstorm, this is a perfect storm, literally. Cold Arctic air from Canada has collided with warm, moist air from the Gulf. The temperature has plunged 30 degrees overnight. The barometer has bottomed out. And the winds, they're not just strong, they're reaching hurricane force at 85 miles per hour. As Jonathan steps outside, the cold hits him like a physical blow. The wind nearly knocks him sideways, and the snow, Jesus, the snow. It's not falling in gentle flakes, but driving horizontally, stinging his face like tiny needles. He can barely keep his eyes open. "I've made a terrible mistake," he thinks, but there's no turning back now. His reputation at the bank depends on it. All across the city, similar scenes are playing out. People venture out, vastly underestimating what awaits them. Most are dressed inadequately for the conditions. Their usual winter coats and boots are no match for this storm. Over on the Lower East Side, Sarah Goldstein bundles her 3 children in every piece of clothing they own. They have no choice but to venture out. The coal bin is empty, and without fuel they'll freeze in their tenement apartment. "Stay close," she shouts over the wind as they step into the maelstrom. "Hold hands and don't let go no matter what." The snow is already drifted waist-high in places. Little Rebecca, only 6 years old, is almost completely submerged. Her brother Aaron, 10, holds her hand so tightly it hurts, but she doesn't complain. Even at her age, she understands the danger. I spent way too much time researching this storm, and one thing that kept hitting me was how totally unprepared everyone was. Like, imagine the worst storm you've ever seen, then multiply it by 10, and imagine it hit without warning. That was March 12th, 1888. The elevated trains, the primary mode of mass transit in New York at the time, attempt to run their regular schedules. The engines strain against the accumulating snow on the tracks. Switches freeze. Visibility drops to 0. At the 6th Avenue L station at 23rd Street, a crowd gathers, stamping their feet against the cold, waiting for a downtown train. "It'll come," assures the station attendant, though doubt creeps into his voice. They're running, just delayed. A train does arrive, eventually. It inches into the station, the engineer leaning out the window, squinting against the driving snow. Passengers rush forward, desperate to board. What they don't realize is that this will be one of the last trains to move that day. Within hours, the entire elevated system will grind to a halt, with trains stuck between stations, passengers stranded in freezing cars high above the streets. Down on the ground, horse-drawn streetcars fare no better. The horses struggle through snowdrifts, their nostrils flaring with exertion, steam rising from their bodies. Many simply refuse to move, standing stubbornly as drivers plead and curse. In one car, a well-dressed businessman checks his pocket watch for the 10th time. "This is absurd," he complains. "I have a meeting at 9 o'clock. The driver turns, his face red with cold and frustration. "Sir, unless your meeting can come to us, I don't think you'll be attending. These horses ain't moving another inch." The businessman falls silent, reality finally sinking in. It's worth noting, and I don't think this gets mentioned enough, that this storm hit at the exact moment in history when cities were most vulnerable. New York was modern enough to depend completely on its infrastructure, electricity, telegraph, transportation, but that infrastructure was still primitive by our standards. Everything was above ground. Power lines, telegraph wires, the trains, everything was exposed to the elements. And now everything is failing at once. By mid-morning, the snow is falling at a rate of 3 inches per hour. The wind sculpts it into drifts that reach second-story windows in some areas. Telegraph poles burdened with heavy snow and ice begin to snap. Wires dangle dangerously, some still carrying current, creating deadly hazards on streets already nearly impassable. At Western Union headquarters, panic sets in. Communication with the outside world is rapidly deteriorating. "Boston's gone," announces a harried operator. "Philadelphia too. We've lost Washington." "What about Europe?" asks his supervisor. The operator gives a humorless laugh. "Funny you should ask. We can still reach London via the Atlantic cable. Let that sink in for a moment. They could communicate with Europe by sending messages under the ocean, but they couldn't talk to Boston just 200 miles away." That's how completely the storm had isolated New York. Back on the streets, Jonathan Berkeley has given up on reaching Wall Street. The wind has grown so strong that it literally blows him off his feet whenever he tries to walk against it. His fingers and toes have gone numb despite his gloves and boots. His face burns with cold. He spots a hotel, not one he could normally afford, and staggers toward it. Inside, the lobby is already crowded with others who've abandoned their journeys. The clerk behind the desk looks overwhelmed. "Room for the night?" Jonathan asks, pulling out his wallet. The clerk shakes his head. "All full, sir, but you're welcome to stay in the lobby. Everyone else is." Jonathan sinks into an armchair, grateful just to be out of the wind. A waiter circulates with coffee, charging exorbitant prices that no one complains about. Right now, that hot cup is worth whatever they're asking. At Grand Central Depot, the situation is becoming dire. Trains have stopped running entirely. Thousands of commuters who arrived on early trains now find themselves stranded, with no way to return to their homes in the suburbs or continue to their workplaces. The vast waiting room is standing room only. Children cry from hunger and confusion. Station officials try to maintain order, but their voices are drowned out by the collective anxiety of the crowd. "When will the trains be running again?" demands a red-faced man, jabbing his finger at a harried-looking station master. "Sir, I have absolutely no idea," comes the honest reply. "I can't even contact most of the stations on our line. For all I know, the tracks have been blown clear off their beds." They hadn't been, but snow had drifted across them in places to heights of 15 feet or more. Locomotives, powerful as they were, could do nothing against such barricades. I remember reading an account from one guy who was on a train that got stuck between stations. They sat there for hours, getting colder as the coal for heating ran out. Finally, they decided to try walking. bad idea. 6 people from that train died trying to reach safety, just completely disoriented in the whiteout conditions. The real heroes of the day are emerging, though, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. In neighborhoods across the city, those with food share with those without. People with larger homes take in neighbors whose tenements can't keep out the wind and cold. And then there are the entrepreneurs. Not all heroes wear capes, right? Along the elevated train lines, people with access to rooftops near the stations start a brisk business. They bring out ladders, charging a small fee to help stranded passengers descend from the elevated platforms. When the trains can't continue, 50 cents for a safe trip down, calls one such businessman, holding his ladder steady against the platform at the 14th Street station. Best deal you'll get today? Outrageous price for the time, but people pay it gladly. What choice do they have? By noon, it's obvious to everyone that this is no ordinary storm. This is something historic, something that will be talked about for generations. The wind has not diminished. If anything, it has strengthened. The temperature continues to drop. The snow falls with unrelenting fury. Visibility in many areas is reduced to arm's length. Remember Sarah Goldstein and her children. They've abandoned their quest for coal and taken refuge in a neighborhood grocery store. The owner, Mr. Finkelstein, has opened his doors to anyone needing shelter. The small shop is crowded with people from the surrounding tenements, all huddled around the small stove in the back. How long can it last? Sarah asks, no one in particular. An old man, his beard crusted with ice, shakes his head. I've seen 80 winters and never one like this. This is the devil's own storm. Little Rebecca begins to cry, and Sarah pulls her close. Hush, love, we're safe here. But are they? The question hangs in the air, unspoken, but felt by all. How long can the food last if the storm continues? How long will the coal for the stove hold out? What happens if the building's integrity fails under the weight of snow or the force of wind? These same questions echo across the city, in mansions and hovels alike. For perhaps the first time, the wealthy and the poor face the same enemy, the same fears. In his office at police headquarters, Commissioner Frederick Dent Grant, son of former President Ulysses S. Grant, faces a mounting crisis. Reports filter in of people freezing to death in the streets, of fires that fire wagons cannot reach, of looting in some neighborhoods. We need to establish emergency shelters, he tells his captains. Every precinct should identify public buildings that can be opened. Sir, one captain interjects, we can barely get our men through the streets on foot. How do we spread the word? Grant has no answer. The storm has rendered the city's emergency systems nearly useless. All they can do is respond to crises as they learn of them and hope it will be enough. Out in the harbour, conditions are equally dire. Ships at anchor drag their moorings in the powerful wind. Some are driven aground, others collide in the poor visibility. Crews work desperately to secure their vessels, their hands frozen, their bodies exhausted. The ferry services to Brooklyn, Staten Island and New Jersey have all been suspended. Travelers who cross to Manhattan in the morning now find themselves unable to return home. Hotels near the ferry terminals fill to capacity and beyond. One of the most incredible stories, and I swear this is true, involves the East River. It froze over solid enough that some people actually tried to walk across it from Brooklyn to Manhattan. Think about that. A river that almost never freezes, suddenly solid enough to walk on. Bad decision, though. When the tide changed, the ice broke up, and some of these amateur ice walkers got stranded on floes. Tugboats had to rescue them. Imagine being stuck on a chunk of ice in the middle of the East River during a blizzard. That's a bad day by anyone's standards. Back on Broadway, the snow has drifted so high that first-floor windows are completely buried. People exit buildings through second-story windows, climbing down into the canyon-like streets where paths have been partially cleared. The wind creates bizarre sculptures of snow, some beautiful, some terrifying. Entire carriages are buried, only the tops of their hoods visible above the white landscape. Awnings collapse under the weight of accumulated snow. Signs are ripped from their moorings and sent cartwheeling down the streets. And still, life goes on. People adapt. They find ways to cope. In Madison Square Garden, P.T. Barnum refuses to cancel his scheduled circus performances. The greatest show on earth stops for nothing, he declares, even as his staff point out that attendance will be minimal at best. They're wrong. The garden fills with people. Not regular ticket holders, but those who were in the vicinity when the storm made further travel impossible. For many, the circus becomes an impromptu shelter, a place of warmth and, improbably, joy amid the disaster. If only one customer had come, Barnum tells a reporter who managed to reach the garden, I would have given the complete show. My duty is to the public. Say what you will about Barnum's showmanship and self-promotion, but in that moment he provided a genuine service. Distraction from fear, warmth, and safety. As afternoon slides toward evening, the storm shows no signs of abating. If anything, it intensifies. The barometer reaches its lowest point. The temperature drops to single digits. The wind howls with renewed fury. In his opulent Fifth Avenue mansion, William Henry Vanderbilt II watches the storm from behind triple-paned windows. Even here, in one of the most solidly built homes in the city, the wind's howl penetrates and drafts find their way through invisible cracks. Never seen anything like it, he murmurs to his butler. How are the staff quarters? Cold, sir, but manageable. Cook has kept the stoves going all day. Vanderbilt nods. Good. Make sure everyone has extra blankets tonight. And tomorrow we'll open the ballroom for neighbors who need shelter, if this continues. Even the very rich are beginning to understand. This storm is a great equalizer. Money can buy better protection, yes, but no one is immune to the blizzard's wrath. One of the most remarkable aspects of the storm, and this speaks volume about the technology of the time, is how it affected communications. The telegraph system, the internet of its day, collapsed almost completely. By evening, New York is essentially cut off from the rest of the world. The only way messages can reach the city from Boston or other northern points is to send them west to Chicago, then south to New Orleans, then back up the coast, avoiding the storm-affected areas. Some messages are even sent across the Atlantic to London, then back to New York via the ocean cable. It's hard for us to imagine now, in our connected world, how isolating this would have been. No phones, no radio, no television, no internet, just silence and the howling of the wind. As night falls on Monday, the true dimensions of the disaster are still not fully understood. Those in authority know it's bad, catastrophically bad, but the full toll in lives and property damage won't be known for days. For ordinary citizens, the immediate concern is survival, finding warmth, finding food, making it through the night. Jonathan Berkeley, our bank clerk, remains in the hotel lobby. Crowd has grown as more refugees from the storm seek shelter. The air is close with the smell of wet wool and unwashed bodies. Someone has broken out a bottle of whiskey, passing it around to grateful takers. Never thought I'd spend the night in the plaza, jokes a labourer seated next to Jonathan. Always wondered how the other half lived. Jonathan manages a smile. Not usually quite so crowded. Across the city, in thousands of homes and improvised shelters, similar scenes play out. People draw together, class distinctions blur. The shared experience of survival creates temporary bonds between strangers. Sarah Goldstein and her children remain at Finkelstein's grocery. The store owner has distributed blankets and cushions from his home upstairs, creating makeshift beds among the shelves and barrels. "Try to sleep," Sarah tells her children, though she knows rest will be difficult with the wind rattling the windows and howling down the chimney. Rebecca clutches her mother's hand. Will it be better tomorrow? Sarah hesitates. She wants to reassure her daughter, but something tells her this ordeal is far from over. "We'll face tomorrow when it comes," she says finally. "For now, we're safe and we're together. That's what matters." As Monday turns to Tuesday, the great blizzard of 1888 continues to strengthen its grip on the city. The worst, incredibly, is yet to come. The night will bring even lower temperatures, more snow, and the first reports of widespread fatalities. But that's getting ahead of our story. For now, New York hunkers down, braces itself, and waits for a break in the storm that shows no sign of coming. By Monday afternoon, the situation in New York had gone from bad to catastrophic. If you've ever been stuck in a subway delay during a snowstorm, multiply that inconvenience by about 1,000, and you'll start to get the picture of what was happening on the elevated train lines. Thousands of people, some estimates say up to 15,000, are trapped on the Ls. These aren't enclosed, heated subway cars. We're talking open platforms and cars with minimal protection from the elements, and they're stuck, completely immobilized between stations, dangling stories above the streets. Imagine being in one of those cars. The train jolts to a stop. At first, you're annoyed, late for work again, but minutes turn to hours. The car gets colder. The wind rocks it on the tracks. Snow piles up on the floor, blowing in through every crack and crevice. Your fingers go numb, your feet too. People start to panic. That's exactly what happened to Emma Parker, a seamstress heading downtown to the garment district that morning. Her train stopped between 23rd and 14th Streets on the 6th Avenue line. "How long do you think we'll be stuck?" she asks the gentleman next to her, pulling her thin coat tighter. He shakes his head. "Never seen anything like this. Could be hours." It was. 4 hours they sat there, the temperature dropping, hope fading. People began to genuinely fear for their lives. Below them on the streets, enterprising New Yorkers spotted opportunity. Guys would climb up to nearby rooftops with ladders, position them against the elevated tracks, and help passengers down, for a fee, of course. 50 cents a person. Crazy expensive for 1888, but people paid it gladly. "Next," shouts one such entrepreneur, a burly man named McGinty as he steadies his ladder. "Ladies first, 50 cents for safe passage to solid ground." Emma hesitates. It's a steep climb down, and the ladder looks none too stable in the howling wind. "I'll go first," offers the gentleman who's been sitting next to her. "If it holds me, it'll hold you." The ladder creaks but holds as he descends. Emma follows, her skirts whipping wildly in the wind, nearly blinding her. McGinty's rough hand grips her arm as she reaches the bottom, steadying her. "Welcome back to Earth, miss," he grins, "though it ain't much better down here." He's not wrong. The streets are barely recognizable, transformed into Arctic canyons with snowdrifts reaching second-story windows in places. The wind whips between buildings with such force it knocks people off their feet. Visibility is near zero. Emma pays her 50 cents and stands disoriented, wondering what to do next. Going home means heading uptown against the wind, nearly impossible. Going to work seems pointless now. Then she spots a hotel across the street, people streaming in seeking refuge. "Come on," says her fellow passenger, touching her elbow. "We're not making it anywhere else today." I spent way too long studying these first-hand accounts from the blizzard. There's this whole collection at the New York Historical Society. Letters, diaries, newspaper interviews. The thing that keeps hitting me is how suddenly normal people found themselves in life or death situations. Like, you're just going to work, and 6 hours later you're fighting for survival. While thousands struggle with the trains, others attempt different means of getting around the paralysed city. One of them is Roscoe Conkling, and his story is about to become legendary. Conkling is no ordinary citizen. At 58, he's one of the most prominent political figures in New York. Former US senator, almost ran for president, now a high-powered Wall Street attorney making the equivalent of millions in today's dollars. He's known for his physical fitness and confidence, some would say arrogance. Late that afternoon, Conkling leaves his law office downtown, determined to reach his home on the other side of the city. He's dressed well, but not adequately for the conditions. A businessman's overcoat and hat, fine leather shoes, nothing that would prepare him for what amounts to an Arctic expedition. "Sir," says the doorman at his office building, "perhaps you should wait out the storm. It's brutal out there." Conkling waves him off. "I've walked through plenty of snowstorms. A little wind won't stop me." Fatal confidence, because what awaits him isn't a little wind, but a white hurricane that's already claimed lives. He sets off uptown, immediately struggling against the gale force winds. The snow doesn't just fall, it drives horizontally, stinging his face, blinding him. Each step becomes a battle. Usually, this would be a simple 3-mile walk for a fit man like Conkling. Today, it might as well be 100 miles across Antarctica. By the time he reaches Union Square, he's already in trouble. His fine shoes are soaked through, his feet going numb. His face burns from the cold and the constant abrasion of ice particles. But his pride won't let him stop. "Just keep moving," he mutters to himself, one foot in front of the other. He decides to cut through Madison Square Park, then continue up to Central Park, thinking the direct route will be faster. It's a decision that will nearly cost him his life. In the park, the situation deteriorates rapidly. Without buildings to break it, the wind hits with its full force. The snow is thigh-deep in places, with drifts much higher. Each step requires enormous effort. By the time he reaches Central Park, Conkling is in serious trouble, exhausted, partially frozen, disoriented. The landmarks he knows so well are invisible in the whiteout. He pushes on, but each step becomes more difficult than the last. Now, while Conkling struggles through the frozen wasteland that was once Central Park, let's check in on some of our other New Yorkers. Sarah Goldstein and her children remain at Finkelstein's grocery, along with about 20 other refugees from the storm. The small coal stove provides meagre heat and supplies are becoming a concern. "How much food do we have?" Sarah asks Finkelstein quietly, not wanting to alarm the others. The shopkeeper shrugs. "Enough for a day, maybe 2 if we're careful." After that, he doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. Little Rebecca has developed a cough, a wet, hacking sound that worries her mother. In the cramped, cold conditions, illness can spread rapidly, and in 1888, things like pneumonia are often death sentences, especially for children. Sarah places a hand on her daughter's forehead. "It's hot." "She needs medicine," Sarah tells Finkelstein. "Pharmacy's 2 blocks down," he replies. But in this, he gestures to the window where snow has piled halfway up, turning the light that filters through a ghostly blue. Sarah straightens her shoulders. "I have to try. This is one of the things that gets me about these blizzard stories. The impossible choices people faced. Stay put and watch your child's fever rise, or venture into lethal conditions on the slim chance of finding help." Meanwhile, across town, Jonathan Berkeley has given up any pretense of making it to work. The Plaza Hotel lobby has become a makeshift refugee camp with people sleeping in chairs, on benches, even on the marble floor. "Never thought I'd spend the night here," he tells a fellow stranded commuter. "My wife will never believe it," assuming he ever sees his wife again. The thought creeps in unwanted. Surely the storm will break soon. Surely by tomorrow things will improve. They won't, but he doesn't know that yet. Back in Central Park, Roscoe Conkling is in desperate straits. He's been struggling through snowdrifts for over 2 hours. His fine leather shoes are frozen blocks. His hands, despite his gloves, have lost all feeling. His face is raw from windburn and frostbite. And he's lost, completely lost in a park he's walked through hundreds of times. "Help," he calls, but the wind tears the word away, rendering it useless against the storm's roar. He stumbles, falls face first into a drift. For a moment, the urge to just lie there, to rest, is overwhelming. It's almost peaceful under the snow, sheltered somewhat from the wind. That's the thing about freezing to death. They say it's almost pleasant at the end. You get warm, sleepy, you just drift off. Conkling recognizes the danger. He forces himself up, drives himself forward. He later described this moment as near giving right up and sinking down there to die as a man can do and not do it. Through sheer force of will, he keeps moving. Eventually, staggering more than walking, he makes it to the edge of the park at 59th Street. He's been walking for 3 hours and has made it less than 3 miles. A doorman at a nearby building recognizes him. Conkling is famous, after all, and helps him inside. The former senator collapses, half-frozen, utterly exhausted. "Get a doctor," the doorman shouts, "and hot whiskey." They wrap him in blankets, force hot drinks into him, gradually bringing him back from the edge. He's alive, but far from well. None of them realize yet that this ordeal will ultimately kill him. Not today, but within a week, from pneumonia contracted during his foolhardy journey. That's the insidious thing about this storm. The death toll wasn't just those who froze in the streets or got lost in the whiteout. It was also those who survived the immediate danger only to succumb to illness in the days and weeks that followed. Back at the elevated train lines, the situation has become dire. As darkness falls, temperatures plummet further. Many trains have now been stranded for 8 hours or more. Some passengers have been rescued via ladders or helped by emergency workers who've battled their way up to the tracks. Others remain trapped. On one such train, a conductor named O'Malley has taken charge. He's collected all available newspapers, broken up wooden seats, and created a small fire in a metal trash can in the center of the car. It's dangerous, but the alternative, freezing to death, seems worse. "Gather round," he tells the 24 passengers still aboard. "Not too close, and for God's sake, be careful with those skirts, ladies." The tiny fire provides barely enough heat to keep frostbite at bay, but it's something. More importantly, it's hope, a symbol that they haven't given up. "How much longer?" asks an elderly man, his face blue-tinged with cold. O'Malley has no answer. The train company has no way to communicate with its stranded cars. No one is coming to rescue them, at least not officially. They're on their own. "We wait," he says simply, "and we endure." Across the city, fires have broken out in several locations. Ironically, as people desperate for warmth overload stoves and fireplaces, the fire department, hampered by snowdrifts and frozen hydrants, can respond to only the most serious blazes. At one tenement fire on the Lower East Side, residents form a bucket brigade, passing pots and pans filled with melted snow from hand to hand. It's barely enough to keep the flames from spreading to adjacent buildings, but the fire claims the original structure and the lives of 3 children trapped inside. The cruel math of disaster triage is at work. Who can be saved? Who must be left to fate? These impossible calculations happen hour by hour throughout the city. As night falls on Monday, New York has been transformed into something unrecognizable, a polar landscape of white drifts and blue shadows, the familiar cityscape buried under feet of snow sculpted by the relentless wind into alien formations. Gas lamps, those that remain lit, create halos in the blowing snow. Electric lights, still a novelty in 1888, sputter and fail as lines come down. Much of the city is plunged into darkness, broken only by the warm glow of fires and candles in windows. The wind continues its assault, sometimes diminishing briefly only to return with renewed fury. The temperature hovers in the single digits. The snow keeps falling. In hotels across the city, strangers become allies in survival. The Plaza, the Astor, the Fifth Avenue Hotel, all are filled beyond capacity with storm refugees. Proprietors who initially welcomed the unexpected business soon face logistical nightmares as food supplies dwindle and heating coal runs low. "We'll start charging double tomorrow," jokes one hotel manager to his assistant. "Supply and demand, my boy. If there is a tomorrow," the assistant replies grimly. Such gallows humor spreads. It's a coping mechanism, a way to face the unfaceable. As midnight approaches, the storm shows its first signs of slackening, not ending, but the furious intensity diminishes somewhat. The wind drops from hurricane force to merely severe gale. The snow continues, but falls less horizontally, more vertically. For those still caught outdoors, it's little comfort. The accumulated snow makes movement nearly impossible. Drifts reach heights of 20 feet in some locations. Streets have vanished, replaced by undulating white landscapes broken only by the dark shapes of stranded vehicles and the occasional desperate pedestrian. Police officers, those who've remained on duty despite the conditions, attempt to patrol their beats. Many carry rope tied around their waists, the other end secured to a building or lamppost to avoid becoming lost in the whiteout conditions, a technique borrowed from Arctic explorers. Officer Patrick Dolan, trudging through chest-high snow on his Lower East Side beat, hears a faint cry. He pauses, straining to hear over the wind. "Help, please." He plunges toward the sound, following it to a snowdrift against a tenement wall. There, half buried, he finds a young woman, no more than 20, already blue with cold. "Hold on, miss," he says, digging frantically with his bare hands, the snow crusting immediately on his woolen gloves. "I've got you." She's too far gone to respond, her eyes glazed, her lips frozen in a rictus. Dolan hoists her over his shoulder and battles his way toward the nearest police precinct, following his rope back to safety. She'll lose several fingers to frostbite, but she'll live, one of the lucky ones saved by the heroism of ordinary people doing extraordinary things in desperate circumstances. Such scenes play out across the city throughout the night, moments of tragedy and triumph, courage and despair as New Yorkers fight for survival against an enemy more formidable than any human foe. By Tuesday morning, the full scale of the disaster will begin to reveal itself. But for now, in the dark hours between Monday and Tuesday, the city endures, hour by frozen hour, minute by frigid minute. At Finkelstein's grocery, Sarah Goldstein has returned from her desperate mission to the pharmacy, clutching a small bottle of fever medicine for Rebecca. The journey of just 4 blocks took her over an hour, through snow so deep she thought several times she would not make it back. "You're crazy. You know that," Finkelstein tells her as she shakes snow from her clothing. "Could have died out there." "My daughter needed medicine," she replies simply, as if that explains everything. And perhaps it does. The night deepens, the storm continues its assault, but something has changed. A subtle shift in the atmosphere, a barely perceptible alteration in the wind's timbre. Those sensitive to such things, the old sailors and farmers trapped in the city, sense it first. "Barometers rising," mutters an old longshoreman sheltering in a waterfront tavern, though he has no instrument to confirm his assessment. "Storm's peaked. We'll see daylight again." He's right, though relief is still many hours away. The great white hurricane has reached its crescendo, and ever so slowly, imperceptibly, its fury begins to diminish. Throughout the night, the trapped trains are gradually evacuated through official rescue efforts and improvised solutions. By dawn on Tuesday, most passengers have been brought down to street level, though getting them to actual shelter remains a formidable challenge. In the hospitals, doctors and nurses work without rest, treating frostbite, hypothermia, broken limbs from falls on ice. Many have been on duty for 24 hours straight, unable to leave because replacements cannot reach the hospitals through the storm. "Coffee," demands a surgeon at Bellevue, his eyes red-rimmed with fatigue, hands trembling slightly as he prepares to amputate the gangrenous toes of a dock worker caught in the storm. "More coffee." It's a scene repeated in emergency rooms across the city. The injured arrive continuously, carried by friends, by good Samaritans, by police officers. Some arrive too late, already beyond help. The morgues begin to fill. Identifying the dead presents its own challenges. Many victims have no identification, having left home for what they thought would be a routine commute. Bodies are laid out in rows, their features sometimes distorted by frostbite, waiting for relatives brave or desperate enough to search for missing loved ones. This is the grim reality behind the dramatic tales of survival that will later dominate newspaper accounts. For every Roscoe Conkling who makes it through his ordeal, at least temporarily, there are dozens of anonymous victims whose stories end in those cold, tiled rooms. As Tuesday dawns, the city wakes to a changed world, and to the realization that the ordeal is far from over. Tuesday morning, March 13th, the second day of the Great White Hurricane. Dawn breaks over a city transformed. Actually, breaks is too strong a word. Dawn more like seeps into New York, the light diffused through clouds, still heavy with snow. The wind has diminished somewhat, but it still gusts strong enough to create swirling snow devils that dance between buildings. The silence is what strikes people first. New York, never quiet, now lies under a muffling blanket of white. The usual cacophony of horse hooves, carriage wheels, vendors' cries, factory whistles, all silenced. The only sounds are the wind, the occasional distant shout, and the creaking of buildings straining against the storm. "It's like the end of the world," whispers Jonathan Berkeley, gazing out a frost-rimed window of the Plaza Hotel. He slept poorly, curled in an armchair in the crowded lobby. His neck aches, his stomach growls. The hotel kitchen is providing food only to registered guests, and even they're on rations now. The man next to him, a burly construction worker who introduced himself as O'Shaughnessy, snorts. End of the world would be quieter and warmer, probably. Dark humour spreads among the stranded. It's cope or breakdown, and New Yorkers aren't known for breaking down. The quiet isn't just an absence of normal noise, it's the silence of isolation. New York City, the commercial and cultural hub of America, home to over 1.5 million souls, is cut off from the rest of the world almost completely. I interviewed this communications historian once who told me something wild about this blizzard. She said it was one of the first times in modern history that technology actually made a crisis worse instead of better. See, New York had gotten dependent on telegraph, on railroads, on all these modern conveniences. When they failed, the city had no backup plan. In the Western Union Telegraph Office, operators sit idle beside their machines. The wires are down in all directions. No messages can reach Boston, Philadelphia, Washington. The electric nervous system of commerce and communication has been severed. "Try Chicago again," orders the superintendent, though he knows it's futile. The operator taps out the call signal. Nothing, not even static. "Sir," says a junior clerk, "we've just received a message from London." "London? England?" The clerk nods. They're asking what's happening in New York. Apparently, Boston sent them a query via the Atlantic cable. Let that sink in for a moment. Messages from Boston to New York, cities barely 200 miles apart, had to cross the Atlantic Ocean to England and back. The only functioning communication line was the undersea cable, protected from the storm by thousands of feet of ocean. So Boston can talk to London, and London can talk to us, but we can't talk directly to Boston. The superintendent rubs his forehead. Send a reply. Tell London to tell Boston we're still here, mostly. This absurd communications triangle becomes the only link between New York and the outside world for the next 24 hours. The telegraph failure is just one piece of a larger infrastructure collapse. The city's electrical system, still in its infancy in 1888, has failed catastrophically. Arc lamps that normally illuminate major intersections are dark. The electric trolley lines can't run. Even the phone system, serving a few thousand wealthy subscribers, is largely inoperable. Gas lines fare somewhat better, protected underground, but pressure fluctuates wildly as demand spikes and supply stations struggle to maintain operations with reduced staff. Water mains begin to freeze. Fire hydrants stand useless, encased in ice. For the fire department, it's a nightmare scenario. Increased fire risk from overloaded heating systems combined with an inability to fight the blazes effectively. Chief Sands of the FDNY gathers his captains for an emergency meeting at headquarters. The men stamp snow from their boots, their faces red raw from cold and exhaustion. "Situation's grim, gentlemen," Sands tells them without preamble. "We've got 23 reported fires across the city. We can reach maybe half of them. Hydrants are frozen solid in most districts." "What about the reservoir?" asks a captain. Sands nods. "We're setting up relay systems where possible. Steam pumpers at the reservoir, then bucket brigades or hose lines extending out as far as we can manage. It won't be enough. No one says the obvious. People will die. Buildings will burn to the ground. The finest fire department in the country has been rendered nearly impotent by the storm. Priorities are hospitals, schools, anywhere with large numbers of vulnerable people," Sands continues. "Everything else, do what you can." The men nod grimly. They understand. Triage on a citywide scale. "My great-grandfather was a firefighter during this blizzard. Family legend says he worked 48 hours straight, slept 4 hours on the firehouse floor, then went back out. When he finally made it home 3 days later, his wife didn't recognize him. His face was so blackened with soot and his beard so encrusted with ice. By midday Tuesday, the snow has finally stopped falling, but the damage is done. The city lies buried under drifts reaching 30 to 40 feet high in places. Streets have vanished entirely. The familiar grid of Manhattan has been erased, replaced by an undulating white landscape broken only by the dark shapes of buildings." In some areas, only the tops of street lamps are visible, poking from the drifts like strange periscopes. Abandoned carriages form ghostly lumps beneath the snow. Here and there, a horse's head protrudes tragically from a drift, animals trapped and frozen where they stood. The death toll, still unknown, mounts hourly. Police stations keep grim tallies on chalkboards. Manhattan 37 confirmed, Brooklyn 28, Queens 15, and many, many more missing. Mayor Abram Hewitt, working from his home on Lexington Avenue, attempts to coordinate the city's response, but with communication down, his efforts are largely symbolic. Real authority has devolved to the neighborhood level, to police precinct captains, to community leaders, to whoever can actually get things done. In a bitter irony, just weeks before the blizzard, Mayor Hewitt had introduced preliminary plans for an underground transportation system, a subway that would be immune to such storms. Now, as he gazes out at the paralyzed city, that plan seems less a luxury and more an imperative. At Madison Square Garden, P.T. Barnum's circus continues its performances, though to audiences composed almost entirely of people stranded by the storm. The famous showman has thrown open his doors to anyone needing shelter. "The greatest snow on earth outside," he quips to a reporter who's managed to reach the garden, "and the greatest show on earth inside." The reporter, notebook in hand, asks if Barnum considered cancelling. "If only one customer had come," Barnum replies, "I would have given the complete show. My duty is to the public." Behind his showman's bluster, there's genuine humanitarian purpose. The garden houses over 1,000 storm refugees now. The circus performers share their quarters with strangers. The animal trainers distribute blankets meant for their charges. The elephants' hay becomes bedding for children. It's one of many impromptu shelters across the city. Churches open their doors, schools become dormitories. Even the stock exchange, that temple of capitalism, allows brokers and messengers alike to camp on its floor. Sarah Goldstein's daughter Rebecca has taken a turn for the worse. Her fever rises, despite the medicine Sarah risked her life to obtain. Her cough deepens, becomes a racking hack that leaves her gasping for breath. "She needs a doctor," Sarah tells Finkelstein, desperation in her voice. The shopkeeper shakes his head sadly. "No doctor will come in this, and we can't move her." An elderly woman who's been sheltering in the shop approaches. "I was a nurse during the war," she says quietly. "Let me see the child." Her name is Mrs. Abernathy. Her gnarled hands are gentle as she examines Rebecca, feeling her chest, listening to her breathing. "Pneumonia," she pronounces. "We need to keep her warm, keep her drinking, and we need to make a mustard plaster for her chest." Finkelstein rummages through his shelves, finding the ingredients. Mrs. Abernathy works with quiet efficiency, preparing the pungent remedy. "My Edwin had the same when he was small," she tells Sarah as she applies the plaster to Rebecca's chest. "This drew out the infection, saved his life." Sarah wants to believe her, needs to believe her. In the absence of modern medicine, these folk remedies are all they have. "Thank you," she whispers, clasping the old woman's hand. Mrs. Abernathy just nods. "We look after each other. It's all we can do." That sentiment echoes across the city. Strangers helping strangers. Communities forming in the crucible of crisis. Not everyone rises to the occasion, of course. Reports of looting surface in some neighborhoods. Price gouging becomes common. A loaf of bread that cost 5 cents on Sunday now sells for $1 if you can find it. Unscrupulous landlords demand extra payment for emergency coal. But these are exceptions. More common are stories of sacrifice and generosity, the wealthy opening their homes to strangers, workers sharing their lunch pails, children offering their blankets to the elderly. By Tuesday evening, the wind finally begins to die down significantly. The temperature remains bitterly cold, but the hurricane-force gusts that gave the storm its nickname have diminished to merely strong. In some areas, people venture out, beginning the monumental task of digging out. They form impromptu crews, attacking the drifts with shovels, with boards, with bare hands if necessary. The work is backbreaking. A path cleared becomes a canyon through snow walls towering above head height. Progress is measured in feet, not blocks. Jonathan Berkeley, tired of the increasingly uncomfortable conditions in the plaza lobby, joins one such crew working on Fifth Avenue. "Never thought I'd be grateful for manual labour," he tells a fellow shoveler as they pause to catch their breath, their exhalations forming thick clouds in the frigid air. "Keeps the blood flowing," grunts his companion. "Stay still too long in this cold, you might never move again." They've cleared about 50 yards in 2 hours, a narrow path barely wide enough for a single person to walk. It seems futile against the vastness of the storm's impact, but it's something. A start. As darkness falls again on Tuesday, much of the city remains without electricity or gas lighting. Candles and oil lamps cast flickering shadows in windows. In some neighborhoods, bonfires burn at intersections, serving as beacons for the lost and gathering points for the community. These fires are technically illegal. Open flames on city streets violate numerous ordinances, but no one is enforcing such rules now. The police have more pressing concerns than fire code violations. Officer Patrick Dolan, still on duty after nearly 36 hours, stops at one such bonfire on the Lower East Side. A dozen people huddle around it, passing a bottle of whiskey for warmth as much as intoxication. "Evening, officer," calls one man. "Care to join us?" Dolan should refuse. Drinking on duty is strictly forbidden, but he's cold to his bones, exhausted beyond measure. He accepts the bottle, takes a small sip, feels the blessed warmth spread through his chest. "Any word on when this ends?" asks a woman, pulling a threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders. Dolan shakes his head. "Snow's stopped mostly, wind's dying down. Now it's just digging out. Could be days before things are back to normal, if they ever are," mutters someone else. There's a general murmur of agreement. Everyone senses that something fundamental has changed. The city's vulnerability has been exposed. Its technological marvels, the elevated trains, the telegraph wires, the electrical grid, have failed catastrophically. The conversation around the fire turns to rumours, wild stories spreading through a city without official sources of information. Someone claims the Brooklyn Bridge has collapsed. It hasn't. Another insists the harbour has frozen solid all the way to Staten Island. Partially true. Ice flows are extensive but not continuous. A third reports that Congress is sending the army to rescue New York. Wishful thinking. Dolan listens, but offers no corrections. Let them talk. It passes the time, gives them something to focus on besides the cold and the uncertainty. I found this psychological study about disaster survivors. It said that rumours actually serve an important purpose during crises. They're like a pressure valve for anxiety. Even if the stories aren't true, just sharing them creates bonds between people, makes them feel less alone in facing the unknown. In the hospitals, the situation grows increasingly dire. Bellevue, New York Hospital, St. Vincent's, all are overwhelmed with storm casualties, frostbite, hypothermia, broken limbs from falls on ice, and increasingly pneumonia and other respiratory infections. Medical supplies run low. Staff work double, triple shifts without relief, as replacement doctors and nurses cannot reach the hospitals. Surgeons operate by candlelight when the gas pressure drops too low for proper illumination. "Hold it steady," barks a surgeon at Bellevue, nodding toward the candelabra a nurse holds over the operating table. He's amputating the gangrenous foot of a dock worker found half frozen near the East River. The nurse's arms tremble with fatigue, sending shadows dancing across the patient's grey flesh. She's been on duty for 30 hours straight. "Saw," the surgeon demands, and the assistant places the instrument in his hand. They work in grim silence, save for the rasp of the saw and the occasional moan from the patient, only partially sedated due to dwindling supplies of ether. In a ward upstairs, a young doctor makes his rounds among dozens of pneumonia cases. Their laboured breathing creates a terrible symphony, punctuated by racking coughs. Many won't survive the night. The doctor knows this, but keeps moving, offering what comfort he can. He pauses at the bed of an elegant older man recently admitted. Roscoe Conkling, the former senator rescued from Central Park the previous day, lies feverish and delirious, his lungs filling with fluid. "Water," Conkling gasps. "Please." The doctor helps him sip from a cup, noting the blue tinge to the patient's lips, the rattle in his chest, classic pneumonia symptoms advancing rapidly. "Rest, Senator," he says gently. "Save your strength." Conkling grabs his wrist with surprising force. "Tell them the snow, like nothing I've ever—" His words dissolve into coughing. The doctor eases him back against the pillows. "I know," he soothes. "The whole city knows of your bravery. It's small comfort to a dying man, but it's all he has to offer." The doctor moves on to the next bed, the next patient, carrying his dwindling supplies of medicine and his ever-diminishing reserves of energy. None of them know yet that Conkling will survive another month before succumbing to the pneumonia contracted during his ill-fated journey through Central Park. His death will become symbolic of the blizzard's lasting impact, reaching beyond the immediate storm to claim victims weeks later. By midnight Tuesday, the immediate crisis of the storm itself has passed. The snow has stopped. The wind has diminished to occasional gusts. The temperature remains bitterly cold but stable. Now begins the aftermath, arguably more dangerous than the storm itself. Food supplies dwindle, fuel for heating runs low, water becomes increasingly scarce as pipes freeze and mains crack, and still the city remains cut off. No trains can reach Manhattan. The ferry services remain suspended due to ice in the harbour. Telegraph lines are down in all directions. In his mansion, William Vanderbilt II convenes an impromptu meeting of business leaders who've managed to reach him, neighbours mostly, trudging through the snow from nearby Fifth Avenue palaces. "Gentlemen," he begins, "it's clear that we cannot wait for official assistance. The city government is paralysed. We must take action ourselves." J.P. Morgan, the formidable banker, nods agreement. "I've dispatched men to assess the railroad situation. The tracks are buried under 15 feet of snow in places. I can provide steam shovels from my construction firms," offers another magnate, "and workers if we can reach them." "Money for immediate relief," says Morgan. "Food, coal, blankets, whatever's needed." They continue discussing, these titans of industry, planning a private sector response to a public disaster. It's partly altruism, partly self-interest. Their businesses cannot function while the city remains paralyzed. Either way, their resources will prove crucial in the coming days. Across the city, as Tuesday turns to Wednesday, New Yorkers settle in for another night of cold and uncertainty. But there's a difference now, a sense that the worst of the storm has passed, that survival is possible, that tomorrow might bring improvement. In the Plaza Hotel lobby, Jonathan Barkley wraps himself in his coat, preparing for another uncomfortable night in an armchair. They say the trains might run tomorrow, offers his companion O'Shaughnessy. Limited service, but something. Berkeley nods. I just want to get home, see my wife, make sure she's all right. You and everyone else, pal. O'Shaughnessy produces a flask from inside his coat. Here, little nightcap to keep out the cold. Berkeley hesitates, then accepts. The whiskey burns pleasantly going down, spreading warmth through his chest. Thanks. Don't mention it. We're all in this together, right? That simple phrase, "we're all in this together," echoes across the city that night, spoken in different languages, different accents, but carrying the same meaning, a recognition of shared humanity in the face of overwhelming natural force. As the city sleeps fitfully and cold, the stars emerge overhead for the first time since the storm began. The clouds part, revealing a brilliant winter sky, painfully beautiful and indifferent to the suffering below. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but also the first real steps toward recovery. The Great White Hurricane has done its worst. Now comes the reckoning. Wednesday morning, March 14th, the sun rises on a New York City that resembles an Arctic landscape more than the bustling metropolis it had been just 3 days earlier. The snow has finally stopped. The wind has died down to occasional gusts, but the temperature remains bitterly cold, and the damage is catastrophic. From your bed right now, all warm and cozy with blankets pulled up, it's hard to imagine the scale of what happened. Picture your entire neighborhood buried so deep that only chimneys and the tops of streetlights poke through. Imagine not being able to open your front door because there's a 15-foot wall of snow pressing against it. That's what New Yorkers woke up to that Wednesday morning. The death toll continues to climb. Police stations across the city maintain grim tallies. Manhattan, 58 confirmed dead. Brooklyn, 43, Queens, 26, Staten Island, 12. And these are just the bodies that have been found and reported. Many more remain buried under snowdrifts or trapped in collapsed structures. The Philadelphia Times has begun publishing accounts of those lost, giving names and faces to the statistics. Their stories are heartbreaking in their ordinariness, people simply trying to go about their daily lives when disaster struck. While the 23rd District Officer was on his beat during the height of the storm yesterday morning, one account reads, information was given him that the dead body of a woman had been found in a snowdrift just across the Delaware County line. It was supposed to be the body of a woman in a habit of gathering fern and mint leaves during the summer months. From the appearance of the body, the presumption is that she was frozen to death. A woman gathering herbs, a mundane task on any other day, fatal in the great blizzard. Another report tells of George Crisman, a lightman at a signal tower near Saratoga. He had just been relieved from duty and was on his way home. The wind was blowing a gale, and he was blinded by the snow, and a train ran into him. Visibility reduced to nothing, the train appearing out of the whiteout without warning, no chance to escape. Harry Dreers, a brakeman for the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad. The young man was standing on top of a boxcar when he was blinded by the snow and struck by an overhead bridge and thrown down on the tracks. A routine job on any other day, a death sentence during the blizzard. Robert H. Masterson, age 66, of Tuckahoe. He was one of the passengers aboard a train which got stalled in a cut between Mount Vernon and Williamsbridge on Monday night. After being in the train several hours, hours, Masterson, with a number of other passengers, started to walk towards the nearest station. He got separated from the other passengers and fell in the snow, exhausted. When his body was found, it was frozen stiff. He leaves a wife and 5 children. So close to safety, just trying to get home to his family. Then there's the bizarre tragedy of Alexander Bennett, John Lee, and another employee of the Singer Sewing Machine Company. The men left Elizabethport Monday in a small rowboat for Staten Island. The empty boat was found in the ice, far out of its course. It is thought the men reached Staten Island shore but perished while crossing the meadow. Imagine surviving a perilous boat journey through ice floes, reaching land only to die in the final stretch home. These are just a handful of the estimated 400 victims along the coast from the Chesapeake Bay into Canada, 200 in New York City alone, the highest death toll of any winter storm in US history. I spent a lot of time going through old newspapers from this period. The thing that gets me is how matter-of-fact these death notices are. Just found frozen, body discovered, perished in the snow, a whole life reduced to a few lines of text. While the newspapers document the dead, the living continue their struggle for survival. Sarah Goldstein's daughter Rebecca has finally turned a corner. Her fever has broken and her breathing, while still laboured, has improved. Mrs. Abernathy's mustard plaster seems to have worked its folk magic. She'll live, the elderly woman tells Sarah, her gnarled hand resting on Rebecca's forehead. She's a fighter, this one. Sarah nearly collapses with relief. For the first time in 2 days, she allows herself to cry, not tears of fear or grief, but of release. Finkelstein, the grocery store owner who sheltered them through the worst of the storm, smiles at the news. Good, very good. Now who wants breakfast? I found some preserves in the back, real fruit. It's a small luxury, but in that moment it feels like a feast. Across town at the Plaza Hotel, Jonathan Berkeley peers out the window at a scene of growing activity. Men with shovels attack the drifts that have buried Fifth Avenue. Steam shovels, massive machines normally used for excavation work, have been repurposed to clear major thoroughfares. They're making progress, he tells O'Shaughnessy, his companion from the last 2 days. About time, grunts the construction worker. My wife probably thinks I'm dead by now. Mine too, Berkeley sighs. No way to let them know we're all right. Communications remain severely limited. Telegraph lines are still down in most directions. Mail delivery is impossible with streets impassable. The isolation continues, though with the storms passing, the first efforts to reconnect the city have begun. The railroads, critical lifelines for food, fuel and communication, have launched massive clearing operations. Armies of workers attack the drifts, digging by hand where machinery can't reach. Snow piles higher than a man line the cleared sections of track. At Grand Central Depot, a single train has managed to arrive from Poughkeepsie, the first in nearly 3 days. Its arrival is greeted with cheers from the staff and the few passengers still stranded in the terminal. "Any news from upstate?" demands the station master. The engineer, his face red-chapped from the cold, shakes his head. "Tracks clear to Poughkeepsie, that's all I know. Took us 8 hours to make the run, and we had 2 engines pushing a snowplow ahead of us the whole way." 8 hours for a journey that normally takes 2, but it's progress, the first real sign that the city's isolation might eventually end. The physical challenges of clearing the snow are monumental. New York in 1888 has no motorized snowplows, no dump trucks to haul the snow away. Everything must be done by hand or with horse-drawn equipment. Men with shovels fill horse-drawn carts with snow. The carts then transport it to the rivers where it's dumped. It's inefficient, exhausting work, but it's the only method available. Mayor Hewitt has authorized emergency expenditures to hire anyone willing to shovel, $5 a day, an enormous sum in 1888 when the average laborer might earn $1 or less. Still, even with inflated wages, finding enough workers is challenging. Many cannot reach the assembly points due to the still-buried streets. Those who do manage to join the snow-clearing crews face back-breaking labor in bitter cold. They work in shifts, rotating frequently to avoid exhaustion and frostbite. "Put your back into it, boys," shouts a foreman on Broadway, where a crew of 50 men attacks a drift that has completely buried a horse-drawn omnibus. Only the driver's seat is visible above the snow. The men dig grimly, knowing what they'll likely find inside. The passengers, unable to escape when the vehicle became stuck, have been entombed for 2 days. When they finally reach the door and wrench it open, the foreman braces himself for horror. Instead, he's met with cheers. "About damn time," calls a robust woman in a fur coat. "We were starting to think you'd forgotten us." Impossibly, the 6 passengers are alive, cold, hungry, thirsty, but alive. They've survived by huddling together for warmth, taking turns moving about to maintain circulation, and eating the packed lunches 2 of them happen to be carrying. "Never thought I'd be grateful for my wife's ham sandwiches," says a portly businessman as he's helped from the omnibus. 3 days old and frozen solid, but they kept us going. Such miracle stories begin to emerge across the city as rescue efforts intensify. 5 children found alive in a school classroom, kept warm by their quick-thinking teacher who burned classroom furniture in a metal trash can. An elderly couple discovered in their tenement apartment surviving on melted snow and crackers. A family of 6 who turned their dining table upside down and huddled underneath it when their roof partially collapsed under the weight of snow. These tales of survival spread rapidly, boosting morale and driving rescuers to redouble their efforts. If these people could survive against such odds, who else might still be waiting to be found? The city's hospitals continue to operate under extreme conditions. At Bellevue, Dr. James Wilson has been on duty for nearly 72 hours straight. His eyes are red-rimmed with exhaustion, his hands trembling slightly as he examines a young woman brought in with severe frostbite. "How bad?" she asks, her voice quavering. He doesn't sugarcoat it. "You'll lose at least 2 toes, maybe 3. She begins to cry. "I'm a dancer." Wilson says nothing. What can he say? The blizzard has destroyed countless livelihoods, ended numerous careers. This is just one more tragedy among thousands. A nurse touches his arm. "Doctor, you need to rest." He shakes his head. "Too many patients, not enough doctors." "You'll be no use to anyone if you collapse," she insists. 4 hours, that's all I'm asking. 4 hours of sleep. Finally, he relents. As he makes his way to the doctor's lounge, he passes the bed where Roscoe Conkling lies. The former senator is awake, his breathing labored but his eyes clear. "Doctor," Conkling calls weakly. Wilson pauses. "Yes, Senator?" "The others from the park. Did they make it?" Wilson hesitates. Several bodies have been recovered from Central Park since the storm began. People who, like Conkling, attempted to cross it during the height of the blizzard. Unlike him, they never emerged. "Focus on your recovery, Senator," he says diplomatically. Conkling nods slightly, understanding the unspoken answer. "Such a storm," he whispers. "Never seen its equal." No one has. That's the refrain repeated across the city. Even the oldest residents have never experienced anything like the Great Blizzard of 1888. By Wednesday afternoon, the first real progress in reconnecting New York with the outside world is made. A telegraph line to Philadelphia is repaired, allowing direct communication with points south for the first time since Monday. The first message received is telling, "How many dead?" query. The telegraph operator pauses, then taps back. Still counting. Stop at least 200 in city alone. Stop. The responding message is brief. God help you stop. God help you indeed. It's a sentiment shared by many as the scale of the disaster becomes apparent. This is no longer just a severe snowstorm. It's a catastrophe that will permanently alter the city's development. Mayor Hewitt, finally able to communicate with officials in other cities, begins coordinating relief efforts. Trains with food, medicine, and coal are being prepared in Philadelphia and Boston, ready to depart as soon as the tracks are cleared. But clearing those tracks is an enormous undertaking. Snow drifts 15 feet deep cover miles of rail line. Even with thousands of workers attacking the drifts, progress is measured in yards per hour, not miles. At the Western Union office, the newly repaired line to Philadelphia becomes a precious resource. People line up around the block, desperate to send messages to loved ones outside the city, to let them know they're alive. 1 message per person, the manager announces to the waiting crowd. 20 words maximum. Family matters only. No business communications. There are grumbles from the businessmen in line, but no serious objections. Even Wall Street recognizes that human concerns must take precedence over financial ones in this moment. Jonathan Berkeley waits patiently in that line, composing and recomposing his message in his head. When he finally reaches the counter, he's ready. Mary. Stop stranded plaza. Hotel. Stop unharmed. Stop home when possible. Stop. Love, Jonathan. 19 words, 1 under the limit. Every word precious, carrying reassurance across the distance to his wife in their Yonkers home. As he leaves the telegraph office, he feels lighter. Whatever else happens, Mary will know he's safe. It's a small victory, but in the aftermath of the blizzard, small victories are all anyone can hope for. The newspapers, operating under severe constraints with reduced staff and printing capabilities, nevertheless managed to produce limited editions. The New York Herald, the New York Tribune, the New York Times all publish accounts of the storm and its aftermath, working with whatever information they can gather. The Herald faces a particular embarrassment, having published Walt Whitman's spring-celebrating poem The First Dandelion on the very day the blizzard struck. Some wags suggest they should commission a follow-up from the poet, perhaps The Last Snowdrift. Humour begins to emerge as a coping mechanism. New Yorkers, never known for taking hardship lying down, start to find dark comedy in their situation. On Broadway, where workers have managed to clear partial paths through the snow, someone has stuck a sign in a towering drift, "Keep off the grass." Near another drift, "You can have it if you will take it away." By Central Park, "Do not touch a leaf or a flower." And most pointedly, on a sign labelled The Blizzard Gazette, someone has written, "Oh, where is the poet who wrote of the spring and the birds and the flowers and the trees? They have hustled him off to the cold, cold north and left him there to freeze." This last jab at Whitman's unfortunately timed poem draws particular laughter from those who get the reference. The poet himself, safely in New Jersey, reportedly takes the ribbing with good grace. The humour is a healthy sign, a community beginning to process trauma, to find ways to move forward, but it doesn't minimise the continued suffering. In the tenements of the Lower East Side, food shortages become critical. Most families live day to day with minimal stored provisions. After 3 days without deliveries, pantries are empty. Hunger becomes a pressing concern, especially for children and the elderly. Community kitchens spring up spontaneously. Those with food share with those without. A baker who managed to save his flour from water damage works through the night, producing loaves that are distributed free to neighbours. "Take," he insists, when people offer what little money they have. "Today you need." tomorrow, maybe I need. We help each other, yes? This spirit of mutual aid extends across class lines. The mansion of J.P. Morgan on Madison Avenue becomes an impromptu soup kitchen, serving hundreds of meals daily from the banker's well-stocked pantry. Mr. Morgan's instructions were clear. His butler tells those who express surprise at the magnate's generosity. No one in the neighborhood goes hungry while there's food in this house. Whether this represents genuine altruism or calculated public relations is debatable, but the hungry being fed don't particularly care about Morgan's motivations. As Wednesday progresses, more transportation links slowly reopen. The elevated trains begin limited service on partially cleared tracks. Horse-drawn streetcars return to a few major avenues. Ferry service resumes to Brooklyn, though the boats must navigate through dangerous ice flows. For many stranded away from home, these reopenings offer the first real hope of return. Jonathan Berkeley joins the crowd waiting for the first uptown train at 23rd Street Station. The platform is packed, everyone stamping their feet against the cold, breath-forming clouds in the frigid air. When the train finally appears, moving slowly along ice-covered rails, a cheer goes up. "Remember, folks," calls the station agent, "this train's only going as far as 42nd Street tracks still blocked beyond that. For many, including Berkeley, that's enough. From 42nd, he can walk north following the partially cleared paths. It will be a difficult journey of several miles through snow-choked streets, but at least it's possible now. 3 days ago, it wasn't." As he boards the train, he turns to O'Shaughnessy. "What about you? Coming uptown?" The construction worker shakes his head. "My Mary's in Brooklyn. Gotta take my chances with the ferry." They shake hands. These men who've shared an ordeal, forging a friendship that would never have existed under normal circumstances. "Good luck," Berkeley says. "You too, friend? Maybe we'll meet again someday in better weather." These temporary bonds formed in crisis. They're another aspect of the human response to disaster. People who would normally pass each other on the street without a glance become comrades, supporters, friends. Whether these connections last beyond the immediate emergency is less important than the comfort they provide in the moment. The train lurches into motion, creeping along tracks still partially obstructed by snow and ice. Through the window, Berkeley watches the transformed city pass by. Familiar streets rendered alien by massive drifts, buildings with snow piled to second-story windows. People working with shovels everywhere. It will be hours yet before he reaches home, and days before life returns to anything resembling normalcy. But for the first time since the storm began, he allows himself to believe that the worst is truly over. As the sun sets on Wednesday, New York remains largely paralyzed, but the paralysis is no longer absolute. Paths have been cleared through the snow, limited communications have been restored, some transportation has resumed. The recovery has begun, slow and painful though it may be. And in that recovery lies the seed of transformation. The Great Blizzard of 1888 will prove to be not just a natural disaster, but a turning point, a catalyst for fundamental changes in how the city is structured, how its vital systems are protected, how its future development will unfold. But those changes are still to come. For now, as darkness falls, the immediate concerns remain. Staying warm, finding food, checking on neighbours, digging out, and beginning the long process of rebuilding and recovery. The sun sets on a city forever changed by 3 days of snow, wind, and cold. The great white hurricane has done its worst. Now comes the reckoning and the renewal. Thursday, March 15th. The 4th day since the great white hurricane began its assault on the East Coast. Dawn reveals a changed world. The snow has stopped completely now. The wind has died to occasional light breezes. The temperature, while still below freezing, has moderated somewhat, and the true scale of the disaster becomes increasingly apparent. The Great Blizzard of 1888 didn't just hit New York City, it paralyzed the entire eastern seaboard from the Chesapeake Bay to Maine, as well as parts of Canada. Everywhere the story is the same: unprecedented snowfall, catastrophic wind damage, transportation systems in ruins, and a mounting death toll. In your warm bed tonight, under your cozy blankets, it's hard to grasp just how widespread this disaster was. This wasn't just a bad snow day in one city. This was an entire region where 1 in 4 Americans lived, suddenly thrust back into an almost pre-industrial state. The newspapers, struggling to gather information with communications still spotty, begin to piece together the regional impact. The Philadelphia Times reports that the storm reached over Jersey, New York, and way down into Maine. Telegraph communication was almost entirely cut off midnight Sunday, and the blizzard extended west to Ohio and south below Washington. The paper describes the storm as undoubtedly the worst chronicled in the last 50 years and possibly the most severe of any known in the history of the Quaker City. From Connecticut, the Morning Journal Courier of New Haven calls it a veritable blizzard, the most terrible storm ever witnessed in this latitude. Even in the nation's capital, the effects were severe. The Sacramento, California Record Union reports that Washington experienced one of the most remarkable storms for years, describing it as a miniature cyclone that brought with it a blinding succession of rain, snow, wind, and cold. The news crosses the Atlantic. The Yorkshire Herald of North Yorkshire, England, notes that the New York Stock Exchange, for the first time in its history, stopped business by a formal resolution after it had already been stopped less formally and without a resolution by the blizzard and the snow. What made the Great White Hurricane unique wasn't any single factor. The snowfall totals, while substantial, weren't records. The temperature lows, while severe, weren't unprecedented. The wind speeds, though fierce, weren't unheard of. What made it devastating was the combination of all these elements simultaneously: snow, wind, and cold, creating a perfect storm, quite literally. And it struck a region that had grown dependent on above-ground infrastructure: elevated trains, telegraph and telephone wires, electrical lines, all exposed to the elements, all vulnerable. The human toll continues to mount. The Baltimore Sun reports that telephone and telegraph wires and poles weighted down with ice were easily broken or overthrown. Trees were torn up by the roots and railroads were blockaded by the snowdrifts. The downfall of telegraph wires cut off the city from communication with other points, and news was either delayed or completely lost. The Philadelphia Times writes that railroad travel was almost entirely suspended, and West Philadelphia was isolated from the center of the city as completely as if it were miles away. Most dramatically, the capital of the nation has been isolated from the world for the past 24 hours. And New York was as far from Washington as before electric telegraphy was known. The Chicago Tribune offers a vivid illustration. The best evidence of the complete isolation of New York today is the fact that telegraphs from Boston to the city were received this afternoon via the Atlantic cable from England, having been sent under the ocean to Europe and thence to New York. In no other way could access be gained to the city. I interviewed this telecommunications historian once. She told me the most surprising thing about the blizzard was how it exposed our technological vulnerability. Like, we think of technology as making us safer, more connected, but the blizzard showed how fragile those connections were. A single storm could send us back to the pre-industrial age in hours. And it wasn't just communication that failed. The electricity wires, broken by heavy ice and high winds, created deadly hazards for city dwellers. People were electrocuted by downed lines hidden under snowdrifts. Fires sparked by damaged electrical systems ravaged buildings that the fire department, hobbled by snow-choked streets and frozen hydrants, couldn't reach. The scale of the disaster prompts comparisons to other famous blizzards. The Philadelphia Times quotes Signal Service Officer Prender, who says, "I have served 15 years in Dakota in the Signal Service Department, and I have seen some pretty bad blizzards, and I can assure you this one was a pretty bad one. This has been a genuine Dakota blizzard and the worst you ever saw in this part of the country." Even as the northeastern cities struggle with their crisis, the Black Hills Weekly Journal of Rapid City in Dakota Territory can't resist a dig at their eastern counterparts. While Dakota is basking in sunshine brighter than the East ever knows, New York is shivering amid the storms of winter, and yet the eastern people presume to speak of the West as a bleak, inhospitable country. They know nothing of the West. Small comfort to those freezing in New York, Philadelphia, and Boston. By Thursday morning, Jonathan Berkeley has finally completed his journey home. The train took him to 42nd Street, from where he walked, sometimes trudged, sometimes crawled, through partially cleared paths toward his home in Yonkers. It took him all night. He stopped wherever he could find shelter, shops, churches, the homes of strangers who took pity on a traveller. His feet are blistered, his face wind-burned, his body exhausted beyond measure. But as he turns onto his street, the sight of his house, smoke rising from the chimney, a warm glow in the windows, nearly brings him to tears. Mary sees him from the window. She bursts through the front door, not even pausing for a coat, and runs through the snow toward him. "I got your telegram," she sobs as she embraces him. "I was so worried." He holds her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of her body against his. "I'm home," he says simply. "I'm home." Inside, their home seems like paradise after the ordeal of the past 3 days. A fire burns in the hearth, the smell of soup simmering on the stove fills the air. Clean clothes, a hot bath, a proper meal, luxuries he'd taken for granted his entire life now seem miraculous. "The neighbours helped," Mary explains as she ladles soup into a bowl. "Mr. Harrison shovelled a path to our door. Mrs. Peterson shared some of her canned goods when we ran low on food. Everyone's been looking out for each other." Jonathan nods, too tired for words, simply grateful to be home, to be alive. Across the region, similar reunions take place as transportation slowly improves and people find their way back to their families. Not all homecomings are joyous, though. For too many, there will be empty chairs at the table, absences that can never be filled. In the city, Sarah Goldstein and her children finally leave Finkelstein's grocery store. Their apartment building has been deemed safe, and the streets have been cleared enough to allow passage. Rebecca, still weak but recovering, leans on her brother Aaron as they make their way home. "Will we have heat?" Rebecca asks, worried about returning to a cold apartment. Sarah nods. Mr. Finkelstein sent his boy ahead with coal from his supply, just enough to warm the place until regular deliveries resume. Another act of kindness among thousands. The crisis has brought out extraordinary generosity alongside the expected opportunism and selfishness. Their apartment is cold when they arrive, but not freezing. The coal has been delivered as promised, and Sarah quickly builds a fire in the small stove. The familiar surroundings, humble as they are, feel like luxury after days spent sleeping on Finkelstein's floor. "Home," Sarah sighs, sinking into her one good chair. "I never thought I'd be so happy to see this place." Rebecca curls up on her mother's lap, still weak from her illness. "Can we stay here now? No more snow?" Sarah strokes her daughter's hair. "No more snow, love. At least not like that. Never like that again, God willing. She's right. There will be other snowstorms, other blizzards in the years to come, but none will match the Great White Hurricane of 1888. It will stand as the benchmark against which all future winter storms are measured. By Thursday afternoon, limited telegraph communication has been restored to most major cities. The news that flows along the repaired wires confirms what many had feared. The disaster extends far beyond any single city. From Boston, at least 400 reported dead along the coast, from the Chesapeake Bay to Maine. From Portland, shipping devastated, with hundreds of vessels sunk or run aground. From Washington, government functions paralyzed for days with Congress unable to meet. From Philadelphia, rail service still suspended to most destinations. Everywhere the same story of unprecedented snow, deadly cold, and infrastructure failure. In New York, the clearing operations continue around the clock. The streets present a surreal landscape. Canyons carved through towering snowbanks, narrow paths where roads should be, strange snow sculptures created by the wind. The work is complicated by the debris hidden beneath the snow, downed wires, broken tree limbs, abandoned vehicles. Each shovelful must be cleared carefully to avoid hidden hazards. And then there are the grim discoveries. Bodies continue to be found as the snow is cleared. Frozen victims who never made it to shelter, who became disoriented in the whiteout conditions, who succumbed to cold and exhaustion just steps from safety. One such discovery occurs on Broadway near City Hall. Workers clearing a massive drift uncover a man in a business suit, his briefcase still clutched in his frozen hand, his features preserved by the cold. "Poor bastard," murmurs a worker, removing his cap in respect. "Probably trying to get home Monday." The body is carefully removed, another statistic in the growing death toll. His family has likely been waiting, hoping against hope that he found shelter somewhere, that he's among the stranded who haven't yet been able to make contact. Now they'll receive the news no one wants to hear. The hospitals remain overwhelmed. At Bellevue, Dr. Wilson has finally gotten a few hours of sleep, but he's back on duty, treating the continuing stream of patients. Frostbite cases are the most common. Fingers, toes, ears, noses blackened by the cold, requiring amputation to prevent gangrene. Then come the broken bones from falls on ice, the pneumonia cases from exposure, the heart attacks triggered by overexertion in clearing snow. Roscoe Conkling, the former senator who nearly died in his attempt to cross Central Park, shows slight improvement. His fever has lessened, his breathing easier. The doctors are cautiously optimistic. "You're a fighter, Senator," Dr. Wilson tells him during morning rounds. Conkling manages a weak smile, always have been. His voice is barely audible, his once powerful frame diminished by illness. What neither of them knows is that this improvement is temporary. The pneumonia will return, more virulent than before. Conkling will linger for another month before finally succumbing on April 18th, becoming perhaps the most famous victim of the Great Blizzard. By Thursday evening, the first significant food and fuel shipments begin to reach the city. Trains from the south and west, moving slowly along partially cleared tracks, bring desperately needed supplies: coal, flour, meat, milk for children. The distribution system is improvised, chaotic. Police stations become ad hoc relief centres. Churches and schools serve as distribution points. Those with means are asked to wait to allow the limited supplies to reach those most in need first. Most comply without complaint, understanding the necessity. A few grumble about preferential treatment. Class tensions, always present in New York, simmer beneath the surface of the crisis response. In the financial district, a group of bankers meets to discuss the economic impact of the disaster. The stock exchange has been closed for 3 days, an unprecedented shutdown. The loss of business, the property damage, the disruption to shipping and rail transport, all will have far-reaching financial consequences. Conservative estimates put the damage at $20 million, announces one banker, removing his spectacles to rub his tired eyes. It could easily be twice that when all is tallied. $20 million in 1888, the equivalent of over $500 million today. A staggering sum, representing countless livelihoods destroyed, businesses ruined, infrastructure damaged. The insurance companies will collapse, predicts another. They can't possibly cover all the claims. Or some will, agrees the first, but the stronger ones will survive. They'll raise rates afterward, of course. This cold financial calculation occurs in comfortable offices, while outside, people still struggle for basic necessities. But the economic machinery must restart eventually. The city's recovery depends on it. As darkness falls on Thursday, more of the city has electric lighting restored. Block by block, street by street, the familiar glow of arc lamps returns, pushing back the oppressive darkness that has enveloped the city for 3 nights. For many, this visible sign of returning normalcy provides psychological comfort beyond its practical value. Light means civilization, means order, means the slow return of the world they knew before the storm. The human capacity for resilience, for enduring hardship and then rebuilding, is on full display throughout the city. In a Lower East Side tenement, a wedding proceeds despite the conditions. The ceremony, postponed from Sunday due to the storm, takes place in an apartment barely large enough for the immediate family. The bride wears borrowed finery. The groom's suit is rumpled from days spent sheltering in a factory. The rabbi performs the ceremony by candlelight. Even in darkness we create light, he pronounces as the couple breaks the glass. Even in winter we plant the seeds of spring. The small gathering applauds, celebrating life and continuity amid devastation. The elderly grandmother dabs tears from her eyes, remembering other celebrations in other difficult times. She'd survived pogroms in Russia, the dangerous Atlantic crossing, the challenges of building a new life in America. This blizzard is just one more hardship to endure and overcome. Across town, in the palatial dining room of a Fifth Avenue mansion, William Vanderbilt hosts a different kind of gathering. The city's power brokers, financial, political, industrial, meet over brandy and cigars to discuss the lessons of the disaster. Gentlemen, Vanderbilt begins, this storm has exposed fatal flaws in our city's design. Our critical infrastructure, transportation, communication, utilities, all vulnerable to disruption because they're above ground. J.P. Morgan nods agreement. The economic cost of this vulnerability is unsustainable. 3 days of paralysis in the financial hub of the nation, unacceptable. Mayor Hewitt, invited to provide the political perspective, leans forward. I proposed underground rapid transit just weeks ago. This disaster demonstrates the urgency of that project. Not just transit, adds another industrialist. All of it. Telegraph wires, electrical lines, water and gas mains. Everything critical should be below ground, protected. These men, representing immense wealth and influence, have the power to reshape the city. Their self-interest aligns, for once, with the broader public good. The changes they envision will transform New York, making it more resilient against future disasters. None of them realize just how profound that transformation will be. The Great Blizzard of 1888 will prove to be a crucial turning point in urban development, not just for New York, but for cities across America. But these changes lie in the future. For now, as Thursday becomes Friday, the immediate challenges of recovery consume all available resources and attention. The newspapers continue to document both the tragedy and the resilience. The Chicago Tribune reports that on Broadway, the sidewalks were cleaned and all sorts of humorous signs were stuck up in the snow piles. Some signs read, "Keep off the grass, you can have it if you will take it away," and "Do not touch a leaf or a flower." Ironic references to normal park rules now applied to mountains of snow. One particularly pointed sign references Whitman's unfortunately timed poem, "Oh, where is the poet who wrote of the spring and the birds and the flowers and the trees? They have hustled him off to the cold, cold north and left him there to freeze." This humour, dark, ironic, resilient, is characteristically New York. Even in disaster, the city's personality shines through. As Thursday night deepens, the temperature drops again, though not to the extreme lows of Monday and Tuesday. The snow, beginning to melt in places under Thursday's sunshine, refreezes, creating treacherous ice slicks on partially cleared streets and sidewalks. The sounds of the city have changed. The wind no longer howls, but new noises have replaced it. The scrape of shovels against pavement, the rumble of carts hauling away snow, the crack and groan of tree branches breaking under the weight of ice, the occasional shout of workers discovering something or someone buried beneath a drift. For those still missing loved ones, each new discovery brings dread. Is this the moment they'll learn the worst, or will there be another day of agonizing uncertainty? Sarah Cohen, a seamstress from the Lower East Side, has heard nothing from her husband Isaac since he left for work Monday morning. She stands in line at the police station, clutching a photograph, waiting to check the latest list of identified bodies. The officer at the desk is kind but harried, overwhelmed by the hundreds of similar inquiries he's handled over the past days. "Cohen, Isaac," Sarah says when she reaches the front of the line. "He works at a tailor shop on Delancey, left Monday morning, never came home." The officer checks his list, then shakes his head. "No one by that name, ma'am. That's good news. He's not among the confirmed dead. Small comfort when he's not among the confirmed living either." "Where else can I look?" she asks, her voice thin with exhaustion and worry. "Try the shelters," he suggests. "Churches, schools, hotels. Many people are still stranded where they took refuge during the storm." Sarah nods and turns away, another face in the crowd of the worried, the waiting, the wondering. These personal dramas multiply across the city, thousands of individuals and families caught in the aftermath of disaster, each with their own story of survival, loss, or uncertainty. As midnight approaches on Thursday, the city sleeps fitfully. The immediate danger has passed, but the effects of the great blizzard will linger for weeks, months, even years to come, and some effects will be permanent. Changes to infrastructure, to urban planning, to how cities protect their vulnerable systems. The Great White Hurricane of 1888 will leave an indelible mark on New York and the entire eastern seaboard. But that's getting ahead of our story. For now, as Thursday becomes Friday, the focus remains on recovery, on restoration, on finding the missing, on counting the cost, on beginning the long process of rebuilding and returning to normalcy. The worst is over. The reckoning has begun. Friday, March 16th, the 5th day since the Great Blizzard began, New York City is emerging from beneath its white shroud, slowly, painfully, but emerging nonetheless. The main thoroughfares have been largely cleared, though massive snowbanks line the sides, creating canyon-like passages. Side streets remain partially blocked. Some alleys and less travelled ways are still buried entirely, waiting their turn in the massive clearing operation. Temperature has risen above freezing during daylight hours, accelerating the melt and creating new problems. Slush, runoff, and ice when night falls and the mercury drops again. The city has a long way to go before returning to normal, but there's a palpable sense that the corner has been turned, the worst is over, recovery has begun in earnest. You know what's funny about disasters? Not funny ha-ha, but funny strange. It's how quickly people adapt. Like if you told New Yorkers on Sunday that by Friday they'd be casually walking past 20-foot snow piles and considering it normal, they'd have thought you were crazy. But here they are, doing exactly that. Railroad service has been partially restored to most major destinations. Trains run at reduced speeds on cleared tracks, their schedules irregular but functional. Telegraph lines are operating again along major routes. Newspapers are printing regular editions, catching up on 5 days of chaos. The death toll has plateaued, not because people have stopped dying, but because most victims have been found and counted. The final tally will never be known with certainty, but the figure of 400 deaths along the eastern seaboard becomes the generally accepted estimate. 200 of those in New York City alone. Each death represents a personal tragedy, a family shattered, a future erased, potential unfulfilled. Behind the dry statistics are stories of sons, daughters, fathers, mothers, friends, neighbors. Isaac Cohen, the missing husband of Sarah from the Lower East Side, is found alive on Friday morning. He had taken shelter in a factory where he became trapped when the roof partially collapsed under the weight of snow. For 4 days, he and a dozen fellow workers survived on meager rations, melted snow, and hope. When he walks through the door of their tenement apartment, Sarah screams, believing for a moment that she's seeing a ghost. Then she throws herself into his arms, sobbing with relief. "I thought you were dead," she cries, touching his face as if to confirm he's real. "Almost was," he admits. "But I kept thinking of you, of the children. Knew I had to make it home." Such reunions occur across the city as communications improve and people find their way back to families and homes. Not all searches end happily, of course. The morgues remain busy as relatives identify loved ones who didn't survive the storm. The economic impact becomes clearer as businesses reopen and assess the damage. Beyond the immediate property destruction lies the cost of lost productivity. 5 days when the commercial engine of America essentially stopped. On Wall Street, the stock exchange reopens on Friday after its unprecedented 3-day closure. Trading is subdued, reflecting the continued transportation difficulties and communication problems. Many brokers haven't made it back to the city. Those who have trade cautiously, uncertain how markets will respond to the disaster. "Steady as she goes," advises one veteran trader to his younger colleagues. "No panic selling. The fundamentals haven't changed, just the weather." His calm demeanor belies the anxiety rippling through financial circles. The markets hate uncertainty, and nothing has created more uncertainty than the Great White Hurricane. Throughout the city, the physical cleanup continues. Horse-drawn carts haul load after load of snow to the rivers, where it's dumped. The work is backbreaking, endless, and essential. "At this rate, we'll be done by July," jokes a worker as he shovels slush into a cart on Broadway. His foreman doesn't laugh. Mayor wants the main streets cleared by Monday. Business has to get back to normal. The worker spits. "Nothing's going to be normal for a long time, if you ask me." He's right. The blizzard has left scars, physical, economic, psychological, that will take months or years to heal completely. Some of the most poignant scenes involve the animals affected by the storm. Horses, the engines of urban transportation in 1888, suffered terribly. Many died in the streets, unable to move through the deep snow, freezing where they stood. Others were trapped in stables without food or water when their caretakers couldn't reach them. On Friday afternoon, a crowd gathers on 23rd Street where workers are attempting to free a horse discovered alive in a drift. Only its head and neck are visible above the snow. For days it has stood immobilized, slowly starving and dehydrating. "Easy, girl," soothes a veterinarian as workers carefully dig around the animal. "Almost there." When they finally free the mare, she's too weak to stand. Her legs, frozen in place for days, buckle beneath her. But she's alive, one small victory amid countless tragedies. Smaller animals fared even worse. The city's population of stray cats and dogs was decimated. Birds fell frozen from the sky or starved when their food sources were buried. Even rats, usually the most adaptable of urban creatures, died in droves, their burrows flooded by melting snow or collapsed under the weight of drifts. The resilience of nature mirrors the resilience of the city's human population. Both find ways to survive, to adapt, to continue despite extraordinary challenges. By Friday evening, gas service has been fully restored to most neighborhoods. Electric lighting functions along major avenues. Water pressure returns to normal as frozen mains thaw and breaks are repaired. These mundane services, taken for granted for the storm, now seem like luxuries. A hot bath, a warm room, a cooked meal on a proper stove, simple comforts that suddenly feel miraculous. Jonathan Berkeley, reunited with his wife in their Yonkers home, savors these ordinary pleasures. After his ordeal, stranded at the plaza, the difficult journey home through snow-choked streets, he has a new appreciation for domesticity. "I never want to leave this house again," he tells Mary, as they sit by the fire after dinner, hands wrapped around mugs of hot tea. She laughs. "You'll be complaining about being cooped up by Sunday." "Maybe," he admits, "but I'll never take getting home for granted again." These shifts in perspective, subtle but significant, multiply across the city as people emerge from the crisis. Old antagonisms seem less important. Class divisions, while still present, feel less rigid. For a brief moment, there's a sense of shared experience, of common humanity in the face of natural disaster. I read this sociologist's study about how disasters can temporarily break down social barriers. Like, for a little while after a hurricane or earthquake, people stop seeing each other through the usual labels and just see fellow humans who need help. It doesn't last, but it's a window into what could be. This phenomenon is visible in small ways throughout the city. A banker helps a street sweeper dig out his tenement entrance. A socialite serves soup at a Lower East Side relief kitchen. A construction worker shares his lunch with a Wall Street clerk. Momentary connections that transcend the usual social boundaries. These connections create space for new ideas, new approaches to urban problems. The disaster has exposed critical vulnerabilities in the city's design and infrastructure. Addressing these weaknesses will require cooperation across class lines, across political divisions. Mayor Hewitt, meeting with city engineers and private industry representatives, frames the challenge directly. "Gentlemen, this storm has demonstrated beyond any doubt that our current systems are inadequate. We must rethink how we build and maintain our city's vital networks." The most obvious vulnerability is the above-ground placement of essential services, transportation, communication, utilities. Exposed to the elements, they failed catastrophically during the blizzard. "Everything critical must go underground," argues the chief engineer. "Subway systems instead of elevated trains, buried cables instead of overhead wires, protected water and gas mains. The cost would be enormous, far beyond what the city government could fund alone." Private investment would be essential, which means aligning public need with profit potential. My firm is prepared to invest substantially in underground rapid transit, offers JP Morgan, provided the terms are favourable. Other industrialists make similar commitments. The disaster has created opportunity for profit, yes, but also for genuine improvement, for innovation, for building a more resilient city. What none of them fully appreciate yet is that the Great Blizzard of 1888 will accelerate the development of the modern American city. The changes it inspires, moving infrastructure underground, building more robust systems, planning for resilience, will spread far beyond New York, influencing urban development across the country. The immediate concern, however, remains recovery. By Saturday, March 17th, much of the city has resumed a semblance of normal operations. Stores reopen, factories restart production, schools prepare to welcome students again on Monday. But normal has a new definition now. The physical landscape remains transformed. Massive snow piles will linger for weeks, some into April. Buildings damaged by snow load or fire await repair. Streets and sidewalks buckle from the freeze-thaw cycle. More profound are the psychological changes. A collective trauma has occurred. Everyone who lived through the Great White Hurricane carries the experience with them. Memories of fear, of cold, of uncertainty, but also of courage, of kindness, of survival. Some people can't stop talking about their experiences. Others refuse to discuss the storm at all. Some have nightmares about being buried alive in snow. Others develop new phobias about winter, about confined spaces, about being separated from loved ones. These psychological effects receive little formal attention in 1888. The concept of post-traumatic stress is decades away from medical recognition. People are expected to simply move on, to put the experience behind them, to get back to work. Most do exactly that, with varying degrees of success. The human capacity for adaptation, for normalizing even extreme experiences, is remarkable. Life continues, altered but intact. Sarah Goldstein's family exemplifies this resilience. Rebecca has fully recovered from her illness, showing no lasting effects from her brush with pneumonia. Isaac, though thinner and more subdued after his ordeal trapped in the factory, returns to his tailor shop as soon as it reopens. On Saturday afternoon, Sarah takes the children to a small park near their tenement. The snow has been partially cleared, creating an impromptu playground. Children slide down the slopes of packed snow, build forts and snowmen, engage in spirited snowball fights. "Be careful," Sarah calls as Aaron hurls himself down a particularly steep incline. But she's smiling. After days of confinement, of fear, of uncertainty, the simple sight of her children playing brings profound joy. The storm that nearly took them now provides their entertainment. Nature gives as well as takes. The newspapers continue to document both the disaster and the recovery. Reports from other affected cities show similar patterns: gradual restoration of services, continuing challenges, communities coming together. The Baltimore Sun describes how telephone and telegraph poles were weighted down with ice, were easily broken or overthrown, and how trees were torn up by the roots. The Philadelphia Times reports that railroad travel remains almost entirely suspended in some areas, with communities isolated from the center of the city as completely as if it were miles away. These accounts reinforce what New Yorkers already know. This was no ordinary storm. This was something historic, something that will be remembered and discussed for generations. The comparisons to Western blizzards continue as well. Several papers note that the East has experienced a genuine Dakota blizzard, drawing parallels to the children's blizzard that struck the plains just 2 months earlier in January. These comparisons receive a mixed reception in the West. While some Westerners send aid and sympathy, others can't resist pointing out the irony of Easterners experiencing what plains dwellers consider a fact of life. The Black Hills Weekly Journal of Rapid City writes, "While Dakota is basking in sunshine brighter than the East ever knows, New York is shivering amid the storms of winter, and yet the Eastern people presume to speak of the West as a bleak, inhospitable country. They know nothing of the West." This regional rivalry, the tough, self-reliant West versus the supposedly soft, unprepared East, adds another dimension to the disaster narrative. Each side believes it would have handled the situation better than the other. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere in between. The Dakota blizzards, while frequent, rarely hit regions with the population density of the eastern seaboard. The East, while perhaps less prepared psychologically for such storms, faced unique challenges due to its urban concentration and infrastructure dependencies. Different environments, different vulnerabilities, different responses, but the same fundamental human experiences of fear, survival, and resilience. By Saturday evening, the temperature rises enough that significant melting occurs. Water runs in rivulets down streets, forming pools at intersections, finding its way into basements and subway excavations. This creates new problems, flooding in low-lying areas, ice when temperatures drop again at night, waterlogged buildings. The city's drainage system, designed for normal rainfall, struggles to handle the volume of snowmelt. Workers hurry to clear storm drains buried under snow and ice. Pumps run continuously in basements and construction sites. The battle against the elements continues, shifting from snow removal to flood prevention. Through it all, the city's spirit remains unbroken. Humor continues to serve as a coping mechanism. The signs posted in snowdrifts, "Keep off the grass," and others, multiply as more people join the joke. Street vendors hawk blizzard souvenirs, small bottles supposedly containing authentic snow from the Great Storm of '88, actually filled with ordinary water that will never be verified. Enterprising photographers do brisk business taking portraits of people posed atop massive drifts or beside snow sculptures created by the wind. Newspapers publish cartoons depicting the storm as a wild bearded giant or the city as a snow-buried damsel in distress. One particularly popular image shows Father Knickerbocker, the personification of New York, wrapped in blankets, shivering before a stove, while a figure labeled Dakota Blizzard looms menacingly outside his window. This ability to find humor amid hardship is a quintessentially human trait, and perhaps especially a New York trait. The city that prides itself on toughness, on resilience, on never backing down, demonstrates these qualities even in the face of unprecedented natural disaster. As Saturday night falls, the first real normalcy returns to some neighborhoods. Restaurants and saloons are filled with patrons eager to escape their homes, to reconnect with friends, to share their storm experiences. There I was, stuck on the L for 6 hours, boasts one man at McSorley's alehouse. His audience, suitably impressed, thought I'd freeze to death for sure. Not to be outdone, his companion counters, "That's nothing. I walked from Wall Street to Harlem through drifts up to my neck. Took me 8 hours." The stories grow taller with each retelling, each drink. That's another part of human nature, the need to narrativize experience, to find meaning in chaos, to cast ourselves as the heroes of our own adventures. For many, the Great Blizzard of 1888 will become a defining moment in their personal histories, the benchmark against which all future hardships are measured. Not as bad as the '88 blizzard will become a common refrain in the years to come. And they're not wrong. The Great White Hurricane truly was exceptional in its intensity, in its impact, in the challenges it presented and the responses it inspired. As Saturday becomes Sunday, exactly 1 week after the calm before the storm, New York continues its slow return to normalcy. The physical recovery will take weeks more, the economic recovery months, the psychological recovery years. But the most lasting impact will be on how the city, and by extension urban America, thinks about infrastructure, about resilience, about protecting vital systems from natural disasters. The seeds of change have been planted. The Great Blizzard of 1888 will bear fruit in the subways, the underground utilities, the disaster planning that shapes the modern American city. That transformation, however, lies in the future. For now, as the city sleeps, the immediate concerns remain: clearing the snow, repairing the damage, burying the dead, caring for the injured, finding the missing, restoring services, and returning to the routines of daily life. The Great White Hurricane has done its worst. The recovery continues. The city endures. The legacy of the Great White Hurricane of 1888 extended far beyond the immediate aftermath. As weeks turned to months and months to years, the impact of those 4 March days continued to reshape New York City and urban America. Cozy in your bed right now, it's easy to take for granted how cities are designed, the infrastructure hidden beneath your feet, the transit systems that keep a city moving even in bad weather, the disaster preparedness we've come to expect. These weren't always there. Many of these innovations trace their origins to those brutal days in March 1888, when everything failed at once. By the first anniversary of the blizzard in 1889, most physical evidence of the storm had long since vanished. The last stubborn snow piles had melted by late April 1888. Damaged buildings were repaired or demolished. Streets and sidewalks were patched and rebuilt. To a casual observer, the city appeared unchanged. But beneath the surface, literally and figuratively, profound transformations were underway. The most immediate and obvious change was the movement of utilities underground. Within weeks of the disaster, city ordinances were passed requiring electrical, telegraph, and telephone companies to bury their wires. No longer would these vital communication and power lines hang vulnerably above the streets, exposed to ice, wind, and falling trees. "It'll cost a fortune," complained one utility executive when presented with the new requirements. "It'll cost more to lose service for days again," Mayor Hewitt responded. "The decision is final." Similar regulations spread to other cities along the eastern seaboard. Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington all had experienced the catastrophic failure of above-ground utilities during the blizzard. All moved quickly to mandate buried lines. But the most significant legacy of the Great Blizzard was its impact on transportation infrastructure. The elevated trains, those iron lifelines that had failed so completely during the storm, were revealed as fundamentally vulnerable. Thousands stranded in freezing cars, entire routes immobilized by snow and ice, the system paralyzed for days. It was unacceptable for a modern city. The alternative had already been proposed: underground rapid transit, subway systems protected from the elements, able to operate regardless of surface conditions. The blizzard transformed this concept from a luxury to a necessity. William Steinway, the piano manufacturer whose diary provides such vivid first-hand accounts of the storm, was appointed to the city's subway commission. The experience of being trapped in a city with paralyzed transportation convinced him of the urgent need for subways. "The storm stopped the ELS completely," he wrote in his diary. It is again snowing hard. All business is suspended. The workmen cannot reach factories. This personal experience of business disruption, combined with his role as a major employer, gave Steinway a powerful incentive to support underground transit. He joined other influential figures in pushing for subway development. The results weren't immediate. Major infrastructure changes never are. Planning, funding, engineering, politics all took time. Boston would ultimately build America's first subway, opening in 1897. New York's first line wouldn't begin operation until 1904. But when Mayor Hewitt died in 1903, he was posthumously given the title Father of the New York Subway. His advocacy for underground transit, amplified by the Great Blizzard's demonstration of elevated lines vulnerability, had eventually borne fruit. Jonathan Berkeley experienced this transformation firsthand. By 1904, 16 years after the blizzard, he had risen to become a senior bank officer. On opening day of the new subway, October 27th, he joined the crowds waiting to board at City Hall Station. Remember